Look, it's a real clapperboard.
No, Dan, we're not messing around. I've told you we're not messing around.
Justin has to take one.
We are rolling. Guys, I have some concern that I'm not going to make it out of this. So let's see how we go. Dan, lovely to see you.
And you, Justin?
Where are we? Please, we're not on set, are we? We're not on the set of
No,
the
this is not the Kingsman set. We're not in a studio anywhere at all. It feels like one, I have to say. We're in the long room at Audley House on the junction of Mount Street and South Audley Street, which is a sort of legendary temple, if you like, to Victorian gunmaking.
So thank you very much for welcoming us in. I've known of Purdey for many, many years, and it's probably through my love of craftsmanship, really, that I first encountered the brand. Give us a brief background on who Purdey is, what Purdey is,
Yep.
and why you would come to Purdey.
Why you'd come to Purdey? There's 100 reasons why you'd come to Purdey, and I'll distill it down. Purdey was founded in 1814 by the man over my left shoulder, James Purdey, who had been an apprentice to a man called Manton. He then became a craftsman in his own right, and he was a stocker. So a stocker is the bloke that makes the wooden bits. And he set up on his own in 1814 and grew his business very quickly. And by the time he handed over to his son, James Purdey the younger, who then went on to build this building, we supplied every crowned head in Europe with their firearms, including the likes of Captain Cook, before he went on the Beagle, came to us and commissioned 14 guns. All of the history of our gun making since 1814 is in the ledgers behind you. So we go back to 1818, so I don't know what happened the first 4 years. It was probably on the back of an envelope. But after that, we've got the ledgers ever since and right up to the current day. Purdey are a gun maker. We're owned by Richemont. We were owned by the Purdey family for many, many years. And then in 1996, a man called Richard Beaumont, whose picture is also on the wall, sold the business to Johann Rupert, who bought it and has owned it ever since. And we are part of this amazing luxury group that protects and preserves craftsmanship, and that's what we do. We make guns. Our factory is in Hammersmith, which is about 3 miles from here, hand building and making shotguns and rifles for everything from shooting deer in the Highlands to shooting grouse on a moor in Yorkshire.
And forgive me for my naivety, but when someone comes in and buys a gun from you, it's bespoke at every time. Every gun is...
It's slower than a suit. I mean, you're far more used to going to Terry Hast and things, but we will meet with somebody who says, I'd be interested in buying a gun. We'll show them a series of guns. We will then help them to choose which model of gun they want. And that ranges from what might be our welcome level, if you like, right the way through to the most bespoke pair or even trio of guns, all identically matched, with engraving, with pictures of your dog or your house or your family on it, all of which can be done. And that process will end up with a gun that is not only measured up and bespoke to your size and shape and the length of your arms and the way your chin bones sit. So there's a whole series of measurements, but every aspect of the gun will be made to that gun. So it's very much a bespoke process. Making a gun for us takes between 12 and 24 months, maybe a bit longer for certain guns.
And every element made in Hammersmith here?
Yeah.
Wow, that's
Absolutely,
incredible.
the whole thing.
And you did mention before we started filming that more often than not people buy two.
Yeah.
Do you offer buy one, get one free offer?
We haven't gone that far. Despite my background working for Tesco for 10 years, we haven't brought that to Purdey.
And why do people buy two at a time? Because I didn't know this.
It's called double gunning, and it's been running for years and traditionally, and even triple gunning was a case. The idea is that when you're shooting in large quantities of birds coming over you, rather than having to look down and load your gun yourself, you give your gun to your man, who's your loader standing behind you, and he gives you the other one, and you carry on looking up and shooting. There's some wonderful stories about customers being told 30, 40, 50 years ago that we would be single gunning on this particular day, and they turn around and say, but where do the cartridges go in? Because they've never actually loaded their own gun. They've only ever received one from the man standing behind them.
I'm one of the worst clay pigeon shooters that you will have ever
No,
laid eyes on.
honestly, I can find you somebody worse.
Okay. Now, Dan, you've been CEO here for the last 5 years. We're here to talk about Purdey and guns, but we're also here to talk about watches.
Oh, great.
and I can see you've had the memo, which is fantastic. Did you have an interest in watches before you joined Purdey?
I've always loved anything mechanical, anything gadget-based. You know, historically, I've always been the man who can make the telly work and anything to go with it. And I love the concept of what a watch is. When I was very young, so when I was 17, nearly 18, I ran away to sea. So I went to Dartmouth and joined the Navy. I spent 10 years in the Navy and became a navigator. And the idea of time and the ability to have a portable device that will tell the time accurately was founded in maritime navigation. And therefore there's always been, for me, this sort of just this background thing. My father was in the Navy as well. My father also loved watches. He wasn't a collector, but he liked the concept of watches, and I think that rubbed off on me. And you know, I'm not one of those people who is fixated with watches, and I don't know enough about them. And when I watch your videos, there was a whole world just opened up to me about how complex this is, about how much there is that overlaps between what we make in guns in terms of craftsmanship, passion, desire, and watchmaking.
Your insight's fascinating though, because we were talking before we started filming about, you know, the different characters who lead the brands that we know and love from Richemont, and just you've got such an insight into what's going on out there. What are the key opportunities and challenges maybe that Purdey has as a business alongside some of the watch maisons before we get into your watches? Because
one of the things that strikes me and always gives me an enormous amount of pleasure is when I meet with the other CEOs, the other brands, and how complimentary and how passionate they are about Purdey.
you can be honest about them, because you were talking negatively about them before we started film. Chris and
nice try. No, I mean, we were talking about people like Chris Granger Hare and Louis Fehler, and across the business, every one of the maisons are run by people who are incredibly passionate about what they do and care enormously about the customer. But we were talking earlier about what defines luxury and this idea of maintaining a tension between desirability and accessibility whilst maintaining something that is purely about quality. And Richemont, I think, does that in spades. You asked the question about how does the future of Purdey, what does it look like, how does it feel in the context of this? We have spent a lot of time over the last 3 years working on clothing and accessories and gifts beyond just gun making. Gun making has a finite capacity for us. We will never make more than a certain number, and I'm not going to tell you what that number is. But capability, the availability of truly great craftsmen rather than average craftsmen, the ability to manufacture and to keep the lead times realistic. I mean, it takes 2 years and beyond sometimes to make a gun. We don't want to make that 5 years. Therefore, we will limit the number of guns. We have a shooting school in Berkshire, the Royal Berkshire Shooting School, now known as Purdey at the Royal Berkshire. And again, you know, there's a capacity to how many people you can get through in a day and how many events you can do without bending it. But I think for clothing and accessories, the brand has such authority, and we're having a lovely time developing. Simon Holloway, who I recruited as our creative director about 3 years ago to lead the transition to a higher level of craftsmanship in clothing, stayed with us for a year and a half before Johan came to me politely and said I'd like him to move to Dunhill. And it wasn't a conversation I could argue with. So Simon is now creative director at Dunhill. And I have to say, I think those two were made for each other. Dunhill needed and wanted somebody with his intrinsic vision of what great craftsmanship and British craftsmanship in clothing looked like. And I don't know how much viewing you've done of Dunhill or what they're doing now. It's pretty lovely stuff.
I've just been there, and I got some time to spend in the shop, which is always dangerous.
Yes.
I was interviewing Mr. Schmidt from A. Lange & Söhne, who've just moved in on the first floor there.
They did.
And it's lovely to see them go back to their classical roots versus some of the more modern
Absolutely.
Iterations.
I don't think anybody felt that streetwear was where the true heart of Dunhill lay, and therefore I think there was an ambitious exploration. But what they're doing now, which has only just started, I mean, Simon's just launched his first collection, I think has got an incredibly exciting future.
Before we move on to the watch on your wrist, which I can see popping out from underneath your cuff.
Yeah,
there.
I don't know. I don't know what it is about you guys. You all wear t-shirts so that you can always see your watch. Or jackets with short sleeves. That's a very beautiful jacket. I think it's from one of my competitors.
It's a wonderful, wonderful jacket. I was given a fantastic discount there, and today's its first outing. I'd love to get your comments in the section below. Everyone always comments on the gear. With the clothing, before we just come onto your watch in a moment, will we see stuff that is just for the countryside, or will we see stuff that's also for the city? Because that's the challenge I feel that Purdey has in its clothing style element. And I commented on a jacket that a woman I saw the other day, Joanna, mutual friend of ours, wearing a jacket, which didn't strike me as something that would have just been in the countryside, but had that ability to be versatile for both. Is that presumably where you're focused?
This is what you do for a living, is you observe product, and most people don't see it. They just see it as being a signature Purdey item. We have technical clothing, we call it the technical range, and that will keep you dry in any condition, and it's also lightweight and it's beautifully designed. And one of our waterproof jackets, which is an all-purpose field coat if you like, which is a lightweight, I think is probably the best piece of technical kit I've ever come across. One of our team who goes out and does 150 days shooting for clients, looking after them every year, says it's the best piece of kit he's ever owned. We then go into tweed, which we call sporting, which can, I mean, I'll wear a tweed field coat in London in the winter because it's perfect. It's got huge pockets, you can keep your hands warm, it's got a collar that comes up to about there, you stay properly warm in it. We've then got lifestyle. Lifestyle will always be based on a theme that is intrinsically Purdey, but it will be designed to be specifically for those who aren't necessarily going to wear it only in the country, and it doesn't need to be technically perfect, but it's beautiful to look at. And that's where craftsmanship is so clever. You know, the craftsmanship of making technical waterproof clothing is one thing. The craftsmanship of design in terms of getting the balance right. Our new creative director, who I adore and I've worked with for 5 or 6 months now, is a guy called Giles Deakin. And Giles has been at the top of the industry for a long time. But he's a boy from County Durham. You know, he grew up in fields and on horses and shooting, and he understands the DNA of this brand like almost no one I've met.
I do urge people to check out the Purdey Gear online. I mean, not everyone can come to the store, but you can see a lot of it online, which is cool. And as far as gear that brings joy, where you can wear it over and over again over years and years and years, and you can pick up the stories, the scuffs, the patina. Yeah. That's what it's all about.
Somebody said to me the other day that your guns last for 5 or 6 generations, and we regularly get guns made before 1900 back in for servicing, and they're still being used extensively. We always talk about our clothing as being, you know, hand-me-downs as well. We want our field coats to be worn by your children and your children's children. And one of the great things we're seeing is that I asked Annika Purdey, who was a previous chairman, Richard Purdey's daughter, if she would join the board to keep the family connection. So she's the 7th generation of Purdey in the business. And Annika's daughter is now also modelling for us in some of our photo shoots. Amazing. And she's inherited some of her mother's and her grandmother's clothes. So you can see this generational thing going on. And that gives me almost as much pleasure as anything.
Now, Dan, I spoke to you about this leading up to this chat today, and I asked you whether you could come with 2 watches. You've unfortunately
come with 2 guns
You've
instead.
Come with 2 guns, which I didn't ask for, but thank you. You've come with a number of watches, so we're not calling it your full collection because we know there are some bits that you haven't come with today. But let's discuss your watches. Let's talk about what you've got. You've got a watch on your wrist there. What is it?
This is a relatively new purchase. After I went to Watches and Wonder, and Louis very kindly took me under his wing and showed me round and showed me what was going on. And I'd heard about this mythological watch called an Overseas. And as you'll see, having owned another steel Swiss watch for a long time, I literally looked at this thing and said, I want that. And I don't think I've ever wanted anything as instantly as much as that.
Visceral response.
It was, genuinely. So I got an Overseas chronograph with the blue dial.
Yep.
It comes with 3 straps, as you know, which I change on an almost weekly basis. I know you've got an Overseas as well. And I've just never stopped looking at this watch. It's something that gives me enormous pleasure to own. And I was talking to you earlier about, you know, the excitement of the build-up to getting it. And I had to wait well over a year to even get on a list to get this thing. And I've loved owning it. And it's a beautiful watch. My wife also then turned around and said, that's so beautiful, I'd like to get one of the collection as well. So we went into the boutique and had a look at a watch for her.
And what did she get?
An American 21 on a red strap.
Fantastic. That woman's got taste. That woman's got taste.
She really has got taste. After having married me, where obviously that was when she didn't have taste. Now she's got taste.
But Dan, let me ask you this. What was it about this model that you liked? Because of course it went through a period of time where it was hugely popular. It was quote unquote a hype watch. What did you love about it? Was it the blue dial? Was it the fact it was a chronograph? Was it the variability of the strap choices? Or the fact it could kind of go anywhere? It
was all of that, but actually the thing that tipped me finally was going to see the factory and to walk around and to look at the people who made the watches and to realise that as much craftsmanship went into making this as into making one of these. And when you see the sheer detail and complexity and the microscopic nature of true watch building, and I went away and did some reading, and strangely, and this, I know you would say that, wouldn't you? But I've never desired an AP. You know, it's never been something that's appealed to me. You know, yes, I thought Patek were an amazingly beautiful brand, But then I looked around Vacheron and I realised actually within the group we had, along with Lang & Söhne, two of the greatest watchmakers in the world. And so I got to look around and I saw this and I thought, it's everything, it's complete, it's bold, it's dynamic, it's got this extraordinary ability to change its persona on a different day, on a different place.
And it's got presence, and you wear it very well. Did you consider the black dial? Did you consider the time-only variation? Did you consider the Perpetual Calendar? Because, of course, you can dial it up and dial it down on the overseas.
Well, funnily enough, one of my colleagues who runs one of the other businesses in the group has got the Perpetual Calendar Ultra Slim, and he always wears it on a rubber strap.
Yep.
And I did look at it and think, that's even more beautiful because I think taking out those extra 3 or 4 mil would make a difference. I mean, I'm lucky I've got great fat arms and therefore I can wear a big watch and it gets away with it. But this for me is one of those sort of heritage pieces. And I have 2 daughters and no sons, but I've got a son-in-law and hopefully in due course another one.
Yes.
And I will really look forward to handing over my watch collection to my son-in-laws in the future.
Amazing.
And a grandchildren, maybe.
Amazing. Oh, I love it on you. It looks great. You best open up that watch roll you've got there for us.
Well, the watch roll is really nice. I was given this
that
by my
watch roll
wife.
from?
It's called Scatola del Tempo.
Fantastic.
And it's a nice little piece of kit.
Can I have a quick feel?
Yeah, it's lovely. But the problem was, I know you said this is a 2-watch game.
Yeah.
This watch roll has 4 watches slots. So you can't
It's
only
okay. I've
put 2
forgiven you,
watches
and I
in
think
it.
we've got to the point now on this series where there's some leeway out there. People have given us a little bit of leeway.
And I watched one of your recent 2-watch collections, and it contained a watch that my daughter owns and a watch that I own, which is a Tribute 3705, which I love. And what am I going to bring? And I've actually bought 4 watches, which are each of them tells a story in terms of my collection of watches. And I just wanted to, bring you something different. None of them are incredibly valuable, expensive, It's not the sort of watch that a racing driver would wear on their wrist, but each one's got a little story. And I thought I'd try and be a bit different and possibly a bit clever.
Well, to start with, for me, that's the price is irrelevant, absolutely irrelevant. Now, the reason I love watches is because of the stories and the people that buy them and that design them. Let's talk about the oldest one here to start with, this wonderful Longines with this enormous crown on it. And what looks like is it a leather strap or is it a lizard strap?
It's a lizard strap.
Absolutely stunning.
This was my father's watch, and I don't know where he got it, but I think he got it from his father, because at one stage he had 2, a little steel one, which was his mother's watch, and this, which is his father's watch. This is 1924 chronograph, one of the earliest chronographs, certainly one of the first ones that Longines made, 18 karat gold, built like a fob watch, in that you can open the back and then you can open the back again. If you've got nails, you're welcome to open the back because you can get into the caliber, you can get into the mechanics. There's no glass screen over the top of it. You can put your fingers inside the working parts of the watch.
Pull too hard.
But anyway, I had it refurbished by Longines about 5 years ago.
And still working.
And it works very nicely. Keeps very good time, actually.
And the dial actually is in wonderful condition because that's the sort of thing that tends to crack on these.
And the chronograph is a 3 model, so you push.
Monopush.
It says monopush, exactly.
Incredible.
And it was just a nice thing. And Dad died 5 years ago, and at the time I think he had an Omega Seamaster, this, and 3 or 4 old Seikos. All of which I've either ruined or repaired.
And you can remember him wearing this?
I swam with. Yeah, absolutely. He wore it all the time. I mean, he wore it regularly.
Interesting enough, I did a book years ago. I did the photography for a book that Longines produced on the oldest watch. They asked their collector base to send them watches, and they catalogued some of the oldest watches they'd ever seen, pocket watches and other things. And they've got an amazing archive, and they really do honour their past. Although you look at the brand these days, it's very modern.
Yeah.
It doesn't talk very much about its past, but it's got an incredible history, Longines.
And it's one of the things I love about looking at watches like Lang & Söhne is that when you look at one of those, you can almost see the very first watch they made in it. It still has that timelessness about it. This is very different from a modern Longines. But it's still, I won't wear it very often, but I just like looking at it and playing with it.
Absolutely stunning. Let's move on to, the quintessential wristwatch.
The quintessential, that's exactly what it is.
It really is. And for a man with your a maritime background, it's almost an essential bit of kit.
I bought this watch on a run ashore in Sydney in 1984 or 5, I can't remember. I was the second navigator of Illustrious, an aircraft carrier. We were doing a round the world trip. And we were in Sydney, and a mate and I went ashore, and we literally were walking down the street in Sydney, and we looked in a watch window. And I think I paid the equivalent of £500 new, and I've still got the box and the papers somewhere for it. And as you can tell by the bracelet, I wore that watch pretty much every day for the last 30 years, until I arrived at Richemont, when I stopped wearing it in public, because it's not one of our brands, but it's still a truly classic watch.
Oh, absolutely.
And I call it now my gardening watch, because I wear it at home when I'm working in the garden.
But it's the sort of watch that just gets better and better the more that you thrash it around.
It doesn't keep very good time.
Have you had it serviced?
Yeah.
Have you?
Yeah.
Did they change anything?
The reason I had it serviced the first time was because I broke the glass with a bottle of champagne. Which was a bit embarrassing. I was literally opening it, seriously, holding the cork, twisting the bottle, and it shot down and hit the edge of the watch. So just above the bezel, there's a slight rise in the glass. So that was the first time.
Did the cork hit anyone?
No,
didn't catch anyone
no,
in
the
the
cork didn't. I still had the cork in my hand, just not the bottle. You know.
I love it. It's such an honest watch. It's got all the storytelling on it.
I think when they became massively overhyped and overpriced, I smiled wryly. I mean, I've never sold a watch, and I don't think I ever will, because the pleasure of ownership is so great. I mean, my brother is more of a collector than I am, and he has bought and sold throughout.
I do that as well, and I talked about it just today, actually, about a watch that I've just bought back. I never buy watches back that I've sold, because I feel there was always a reason why they left, but I've just bought one back, and I'm just processing the emotions of what that means to go back. You know, when you break up with someone, in my mind, you shouldn't be going back. You know, I mean, there was a reason, and you always.
This is really dangerous territory.
I know.
Just when you said, you know,
many ladies out there watching this who I've spent many times with that we could.
You've broken up with all of them.
I've broken up. No, Christ, no, absolutely not. But the funny thing is, you very quickly after you break up, you start thinking about the things you miss. You know, you're very on a human level, and then the reality is, you discount all of those challenges, the things that you didn't like, you put to the back of your mind, and so you're susceptible to going back. And anyway, I've got an IWC Aquatime, a Cousteau divers that I just bought, and I'm excited about it. We're back in a relationship, and I'm hoping it's going to be a better one than the first one.
How many watches do you own?
Oh, Dan, don't do that to me. Don't do that to me. How many have I got? I've got a watch box at home.
Yes.
That's a 10-slot box.
Not a winder.
Not a winder.
The first question when I arrived at Richemont and met the watch guys, I said, do I need to have winders? He said, no. No. It doesn't matter if they stop for a bit. Yeah.
It's one of those things that to me is, you know, been a bit of a cash cow for some.
Unless, of course, you have, I've got a gold Gégé, which is a true second. And if you know, you wind it and the hour hand advances. Yeah. If you miss your day, you spend the next half an hour winding this thing forward.
Well, if you've got and this is a watch that I'm reviewing at the moment. There's a Perpetual Calendar from IWC for this year, so the redesigned
with the dome face up,
which is really lovely.
Very beautiful.
If you have a Perpetual Calendar, there is some argument to suggest that a winder is a good thing, because what you don't want to do is wind too far forward. Then you're in trouble. Generally speaking, though, they're quite easy to maintain. But I've only got one watch that kind of needs to be worn that I worry about. So no winder, but the box itself is 10 slot, and that's been the parameter for my collecting. So it has to fit in there, and if it doesn't, then something's got to go. And that's, 10 is a lot by anyone's stretch, and more than one is a lot for most normal people. But
exactly.
I've accepted that 10 is my limit where I'm at the moment.
That's pretty good.
I'm hoping that we can maintain that.
I'm not prepared to commit at this stage
to the number.
because they range from literally. I've got a Casio 87, the most famous watch in the world probably. And I count that as one of my watch collection. But there's a few others.
And there's a few swatches in there that probably do deserve to be in there, but I'm discounting them, which is wrong.
There you go.
However, we've got a wonderful Portuguese here, which has to be considered a sort of a modern icon, and one that people recognise from across the room. It's the automatic version.
Yep.
So non-chronograph, which is probably the one that you see more often than not. And this one has the blue markers, not the gold. So
and a blue strap, but I always think in moments of confusion, I think it's black, but it's not. It's blue. This watch was. After 16 or 17 years running a wine company called Bibendum, I was hunted to go and work for Tesco. At Tesco, there was a bit of a watch culture when I first arrived. And I bought that in the US as my congratulations for getting a new job present to myself. So that would have been in 2006. You can turn it over and look at it, and just every aspect of it, it's a proper watch. And I've had more compliments for wearing that watch than any other watch I've ever owned. People look at it and say, that's a beautiful watch. And I posted something, in fact, we were doing our Taylor Swift thing with the girls the other day. By the way, my Taylor Swift friendship bracelet says they all sound the same, because they made that for me, because they do all sound the same, and I didn't go. I posted that watch in that picture, and I got so many messages of people saying, what a gorgeous watch, what a beautiful watch. And it's still, for me, it's as iconic as the watch sitting next to it in terms of what Rolex do. And I love what they've done with the Portuguese, and I think that's the new iteration of it you've got on your wrist in the Perpetual Calendar. But this will always be a classic, and it'll always be something that makes me feel better when I put it on.
Oh, it's beautiful. The balance of it's lovely. It's just wonderfully elegant, and it has real presence to it. It sort of bridges that gap between a dress watch and a sports watch. They do now do a rubber strap, which is an interesting, and a bracelet actually for
They're
this
quite
as well.
hard to get on and off straps though. But
Yeah, they're not quick
what I love
change,
about
they're not
some of the
quick
watches,
change.
like the Jago, they've got the little quick release catch on the back, which these don't, and that makes it. I would love to change straps regularly,
Not as
and I've
easy.
got.
You've got the tool.
I've got half a dozen NATO straps, one which on there, but in different colours, and I quite like, but then not on that one.
Yeah, not easy. And if you've got the tool, you can get in on the bar and release it. But yeah, the number of times I've scratched cases and other things.
My point entirely. But I've got, having had that and having been a fan of IWC, since before I bought that, long before I bought that, when the logo was the handwritten International Watch Company, Watch Co. I've since bought a 3705 Tribute as a chronograph, which I love in black.
Incredible.
First ever black watch, absolutely loved it. And was lucky enough to be allowed to buy an engineer, so happy with that too.
The new iteration of the engineer, and in titanium.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So you're enjoying that?
And I will continue to buy IWCs when I'm allowed to and if I can afford to, because this is probably what I spend my money on.
There's something about and it's taken me years, and I've worked with IWC in many different formats for years, but I feel like I've only just understood the brand.
Yeah.
That deep sense of robustness, engineering, materials innovation. I mean, that's what I think about. And
Chris invited me out to Schaffhausen, and we went and had a look around, and we spent a long time with Christoph in the design team and looking at what they do. And there's nothing about that brand that I don't feel has a magical touch to it. What they don't lean on excessively is the sort of absolute watchmaking heritage of this watch and of this company. But they have the most unbelievable setup. But they're innovative, they're clever, they're creative, they come up with brilliant ideas. Their partnership, somebody once told me, who doesn't have anything to do with Mercedes or IWC, who said that the IWC partnership with Mercedes Formula One is the most effective brand sponsorship partnership of any sport they've ever seen. And in terms of how they use it.
I heard that it was a byproduct, really, of relationship with Mercedes, that glove came in, and then the drivers as a result. So it was sort of like an unexpected
And then the
success.
relationship with Lewis and George and what they're now doing and stuff like that. And interesting to see what Lewis wears when he goes to Ferrari.
Yes, it will be. Very, very interesting. Moving on to this final watch, which, interestingly enough, and by the way, I had no idea what you were bringing with you today. I actually gifted this watch in lockdown. I gifted this.
Not that one.
Not this one, because I engraved the
paid
case
for
back.
that.
I know you did. I know you did. I engraved the case back by hand, actually, and I gifted it to my friend, one of my best friends, who I was living with in lockdown, on the birth of his twin daughters.
Oh.
And that was the watch I bought for him, because it's such an incredibly robust watch, and is as a result a watch that's been issued to different forces to use. So tell us, what have we got here?
You have got a CWC watch. I don't know what. I don't even know what the serial number of it is.
I actually don't know
Or
either, but hold
the
tight.
model number.
Someone
Let me
will
tell
correct-
you.
is it W10?
I did tell you I
Might
knew
be
nothing about
W10.
watches. The reason I own this watch is because in 1983, when I qualified as navigator, I got issued with one of those by the Navy.
There you go.
And then I found a place in Devon that sells maritime antiques. And I wandered in, and they had 3 of these, and one of them was a 1985 one, which was, I remember, the same year as the model I had. So I bought it, and I now wear it regularly as just a fun watch. But it just reminds me, because that was the naval issue watch at the time. Now, when I first started, we had a Seiko chronograph as one of our naval issue watches, and I've heard the wonderful stories of the Dirty Dozen watches like IWC being made for the military. And some of my pilot friends used to say, yeah, we had Rolexes and we used to play conkers with them on the flight deck. And, if you held one up and smacked the other one, and if it broke, you went back to stores and got another one. And that sort of slightly made me nervous about the whole thing, but this was indestructible and keeps really good time.
Yeah, cool.
And also it sits very comfortably on a NATO strap, doesn't it?
Wonderful, and I love this particular, I've got my Tudor Submariner on this particular grey blue, which is lovely.
Well, which was the naval issue strap. That's what we got in the
colour.
Navy. That's what you issued. It's the
Incredible.
only colour that was available.
85, you know it's an 85 because it's got it stamped on the case back. Probably 36mm case size, tritium dial, so you've got wonderful patina on the hands and the markers. Really light. I mean, it's the sort of thing you could just get stuck into anything with and know it's going to keep going. Beautiful. And what a story as well. I don't think I've ever met anyone who's had a watch actually issued to them.
I know, well, we used to get them regularly issued, and then most of my mates, when they left the Navy, seemed to accidentally lose them about a week before they left the Navy. So signed the chit to say, sorry, I lost the watch. I was far too honest. I handed mine back in. And about 10 years ago, I remember thinking, I really regret giving them back my watch because I really liked that. And I hadn't realised you could still buy them. And in fact, this was, I suppose you'd call it an antique. I went into the shop and there it was, and I went, you can still buy them, I'll buy that.
Before we come on to these two guns, tell me, is there a watch that you're currently hunting? Because we discussed the joy in the hunt before we started filming.
We did.
Is there something you've got your eye on that you would really like to pick up?
If I only ever buy one more watch, which is very unlikely, but if I only ever buy one more watch, it'll be a Langer's Honor. I want to own one. I want to end my collecting days and life and everything else by saying I own one. And I sit and drool over them. And it's one of the lovely things about Richemont is that you get a little bit of a staff discount when you buy watches. You can't buy a Langer's Honor. They don't make enough. They don't make enough. And in the same way that if somebody wanted and said, can I have a staff discount on a Purdey? You'd say no. It's one of those, there aren't enough.
Which model do you particularly like? Is it a Langer 1 or is it the Datograph?
I think it's the Datograph. I just
with
love those digits. And the new Datograph is beautiful. And actually, a friend of mine in the spirits business has been allowed to order one, and he gets it in October, I think. And which is the one on gold this year that they launched it.
The honey gold one. Oh my God, fantastic.
So he's managed to order one, but I think apparently he had to, confirm his order for another one of something else before he got. Anyway, it's beyond my reach and beyond my ability to pay that much money for it.
Oh, the honey gold. That's a honey gold lumen.
Yep,
so
that's
a lumen.
Yep.
And it's a tourbillon as well, I think. So it's the whole whack.
It's everything.
It's everything.
And that is so far beyond my reach. I mean, you can buy a house for that.
It's a big one.
But I think a simple datograph and the idea of one day. But I'll say that you and I have met when I talk to Willem next. And every time I see him, he's really bored of it. Him and Anthony, Tony, his Dutch commercial director. Every time I see them, and we get on really well. Any chance? No. So and quite right, customers come first.
Absolutely.
But that'll be the watch that. But every time I talk to Grant about IWC, he comes up with another clever idea about something I should own.
There's something about Langer in the hand. And I guess you have clients who talk about your guns in the same way. But there's something about the build quality of a Langer that is just different. It is just different. And I do think they sit by themselves in that respect.
And in many ways, Langer for me is the closest thing to a Purdey in terms of the way it's built. It's almost bespoke. It's not quite, but you feel that you look at the caliber, it's an individual caliber for every watch. It's put together at least twice and taken apart again. And that's exactly the same with the way we build a Purdey. If you come to the factory one day, which I hope you'll do, and you see them with cans of paraffin and a flame, smoke blacking every piece until they file away a bit, until they fit, until they fit, until they fit. So there's a real craftsmanship about it.
What have we got here on the table in front of us?
Two very different guns, but two guns which I think completely typify and personify what Purdey is famous for. This is a Purdey side-by-side, side lock, which means all the mechanics for making the thing fire, open, shut, all that, are all contained inside that plate, which is about that deep inside. And you can't get in to look at it. This is a beautiful hand engraved. It's one of a pair, so this should say, from your side, you should be able to see that it says on it somewhere very faintly number 1 there. And the serial number for the gun is repeated on the tang, as they call it on the back here. But the mechanism that this gun works on is called a Beasley action. And we started using the Beasley action back in the 1880s, and it's still the same piece of kit we use today. So well over 100, coming up for 150 years, of exactly the same mechanism, whereby and it's very difficult to do when I'm sitting here, but this is what we call an assisted opener. which means when I open the top lever to eject the cartridges, the spring is strong enough to throw the barrels down. When you push the lever across, it releases the spring, which forces the barrels down. And then when you want to recock these springs, which are inside here, and they're about that long, it's a full job to do it. And it sits, I mean, this is as beautiful a gun as I think, and as classic. And just to give you an indication, if you decide after this that you really want a pair of Purdey side-by-sides, these are new guns. We don't hold stock of very many new guns. These will be £350,000 plus VAT for a pair. This pair.
Fantastic.
Okay.
And the reason that someone would go for a Purdey is a combination of the history, the heritage of the brand, this particular technical innovation here,
Yep.
and of course the handcraft that goes
The engraving
on,
that goes
the engraving.
with it. And the reason we sell very few guns relatively off the shelf, unless they're heritage guns, i.e. they've been traded in against a new gun, is because we build every gun to fit the customer. And that build process is like having a suit fitted. You want to go through it. You want to be given the chance to try it out, to see what fits, what doesn't fit.
Can you adapt a gun that's been pre-made for,
the
clients?
Yeah, you can adjust a gun. You can adjust the stock. We don't do it that often. It can be done, but it needs to be done by craftsmen because you've got to take a series of measurements. You can adjust it within tolerances. But you know, if you are either very big or you have a very, very high cheekbone, there are some things that can't be adjusted.
That's a side-by-side. Here we've got
An over and under. And this is from a different model range. We make an over and under equivalent of this, a side lock over and under, built on the Woodward action. But this is the newest gun that we produce, and it's called a trigger plate. And it's an over and under. It's a gun designed for higher bird, higher volume, bigger cartridge shooting. In this one, it's what we call colour case hardened, which is a heat treatment to the metal, which is an optional extra. It's like, you know, choosing a leather strap versus a steel strap. You can do things with it. But this contains some innovations that we've introduced for this gun specifically. This is a lot less expensive than a gun like this. And there are parts in here which can only be made by machine. The first thing about this gun is, because it's called a trigger plate, is that the trigger plate mechanism is removable. And you can't do that with one of those. This you can then put in its box and take into the pub in your pocket, so your gun is secure, because it can't be fired unless it's got that. It's also got a barrel selector, which means you can choose whether you fire the top barrel or the bottom barrel first. And that's again, a very new innovation, something we've never done. But if you look at it, you can see that over and unders are very different. They are 70% of our sales are over and unders, whereas if you go back 100 years, we didn't make an over and under, really. And then 50 years ago would have been 75% side-by-sides. So this is a classic over and under. Doesn't have self-opening. It's, you know, you open it yourself and you close it yourself, and you cock the springs when you do so. But again, ejecting, you will normally fire the bottom barrel first. But I just think this is the best all-purpose gun on the marketplace. New, under 100,000 quid, but it's still hand-built by craftsmen in Hammersmith, and you can choose a whole series of options on it. You can choose to have things engraved or not.
I love that particular finish there that's an optional. That reminds me almost of blued hands on a watch.
Absolutely.
And heated at a certain level to get to a certain colour.
And it's exactly that. And I remember showing this colour case hardening to Chris, and we both looked at it and went, oh, blue hands.
Wouldn't that be an interesting collab down the line, is a dial that had this finish to it? So a steel dial.
We did do obviously another one of the group. Before I joined, we'd done a long-term partnership, which was 20 years, with Panerai. And there was a Panerai Purdey hand-engraved watch, and they had large game animals on them and birds on them and things like this. And they were all hunter covers.
Yes.
But it's something, again, we want to talk about.
Listen, Dan, we could go on for hours. We generally could. We said this would be 20 minutes. This is
Did
absolutely
we say
not
20
20
minutes?
minutes. We didn't, but we did.
Well done us.
But thank you so much. And yeah, really excited. We should do the next one in the workshops, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. That'd be a lovely thing to do, wouldn't it? Great to see you.
You too.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.